I stood alone in the funeral chapel, staring at the rows of vacant chairs that stretched before me like a stark accusation. My husband Robert's casket sat at the front, draped with a simple spray of sunflowers, his favorites. Our children, Marcus and Sienna, had both found reasons not to come. Before I continue, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you watching from today? It means the world to know our stories reach you wherever you are. The funeral director, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, approached me hesitantly. "Mrs. Chen, would you like us to wait a bit longer?" "No," I said quietly. "Let's begin." Robert never liked to keep people waiting. It was a Thursday afternoon in Seattle, the kind of day where the rain came in sideways and the sky hung low and gray. The pastor, someone from the funeral home's roster who'd never met Robert, spoke in vague platitudes about a life well lived while I focused on the photo beside the casket. Robert at 68, laughing in our garden, dirt on his hands and joy in his eyes. I sat in the front row. 7 empty seats beside me. Our 2 children, their partners, our 3 grandchildren, none of them here. Marcus had sent an email 2 days before. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Critical deadline at work. The Tokyo office needs me on site. I'll make it up to you." No phone call. No attempt to reschedule a flight. Sienna had been worse. Her assistant left a voicemail saying Sienna was dealing with a personal matter and couldn't travel. A personal matter. As if saying goodbye to the man who raised her wasn't personal enough. When the brief service ended, I followed Robert's casket to the burial plot. The wind cut through my coat, but my eyes stayed dry. I'd cried so much in the past 3 months that I felt hollowed out, empty of tears but full of something harder. The casket lowered into the earth. I dropped a handful of dirt. The sound it made hitting the wood echoed in my chest. Back home, the house felt cavernous. Robert's reading glasses still sat on the coffee table. His slippers waited by his favorite chair. The quiet pressed against my ears. I poured myself a glass of the good scotch we'd been saving, for what, I no longer remembered, and opened my phone. I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't help myself. Sienna's Instagram showed a post from 4 hours ago, right when her father was being eulogized. She was at some wellness retreat in Sedona, posing in front of red rocks with the caption, "Finding my center." #selfcare #blessed. Marcus had posted too. A picture from what looked like an expensive Tokyo restaurant, sake glasses raised. Sealing the deal. Sometimes you have to strike while the iron's hot. #business never sleeps. I turned off my phone and finished the scotch in one burning swallow. The photo on the wall caught my eye, a Robert and me on our 35th anniversary, standing in front of the sunflower field we'd visited every summer. We looked so happy. So naive about what our children would become. "Tomorrow," I said out loud to the empty room. "Tomorrow I'm calling Patricia." Patricia Gwynn had been our attorney for 25 years. She drafted our will 3 years ago when everything seemed straightforward. Marcus would get 40%, Sienna would get 40%, and 20% would be split among the 3 grandchildren. The house would go to the kids to sell or keep. The lake house we'd built ourselves would stay in the family. That night, I sat at the kitchen table where Robert used to do crossword puzzles every morning. I pulled out our file of important documents and found the folder marked estate planning. Inside was the will we'd signed, back when we still believed our children valued us as more than a source of emergency funds. I closed the folder and went to bed in the spare room. I couldn't face our bedroom yet, couldn't see Robert's empty side of the bed or smell his aftershave on his pillow. The next morning, I called Patricia's office. Mrs. Chen. Her assistant's voice filled with sympathy. We heard about Mr. Robert. I'm so terribly sorry. Thank you, Linda. I need to see Patricia as soon as possible. She has an opening this afternoon at 2. Would that work? Perfect. I slept better that night than I had since Robert's diagnosis. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose. Patricia's office smelled like leather and lavender. She stood when I entered, her face reflecting genuine grief. Grace, I'm so sorry about Robert. He was one of the good ones. He really was. I sat across from her desk. I need to change our will. She wasn't surprised. What modifications are you thinking about? I want to remove Marcus and Sienna completely. That surprised her. She set down her pen carefully. Completely? Everything. The house, the lake house, all accounts and investments, I want it all to go to Tyler. Your grandson, she said slowly. Yes. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Grace, I have to tell you, decisions made during grief can sometimes. I buried Robert alone, I interrupted. My voice was steady. Neither of my children came to their father's funeral. Sienna was at a spa retreat posting selfies. Marcus was closing business deals he could have easily postponed. Meanwhile, Tyler called every single day during Robert's illness. He was the one who fixed our leaky roof when Robert got too weak to climb a ladder. He drove me to radiation appointments when I couldn't see straight from crying. I paused, making sure she heard every word. He's only 19 years old, but he has more character than both his parents combined. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I understand, she finally said. I need to inform you that your children could contest this. Let them try. I want it structured so it's as airtight as possible. A trust that his parents can't touch. That can be arranged. She made notes. Any conditions on Tyler's access? Nothing until he's 25, except for education, medical needs, or starting a business. After 25, he can access it freely. That's wise. Patricia nodded. I'll have everything ready by next week. Leaving her office, I felt lighter. This wasn't revenge. It was recognition, acknowledging the one person who'd actually shown up when it mattered. I drove to the grocery store and bought ingredients for Robert's favorite meal, pot roast with root vegetables. As I cooked that evening, I let myself remember the good times. Robert teaching the kids to ride bikes. Family camping trips to the San Juans. Sunday dinners where everyone actually talked to each other instead of staring at phones. When had it all changed? When had my children become strangers? The papers were ready the following Thursday. Patricia watched me sign with quiet determination. I didn't hesitate once. It's done, Patricia said, gathering the documents. But Grace, you should know, eventually Marcus and Sienna will find out. I know. And when they do, they'll hear it from me. Driving home, I felt that strange sense of relief again. Not happiness, exactly. Just the absence of a weight I'd been carrying for years, the burden of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. At home, I went through our financial records. Box after box of bank statements, receipts, canceled checks. A documentary record of decades of one-sided generosity. Marcus's folder was thick. The $75,000 for his MBA at that prestigious East Coast school. The $40,000 to invest in his first startup that failed within 6 months. The $62,000 for the down payment on his house in the suburbs. The $28,000 to bridge a cash flow gap in his consulting business. Every time, Robert would frown and I would worry, but we'd write the check anyway. He's our son, Robert would say. He'll figure it out eventually. He never did. Sienna's folder told a similar story. The $80,000 wedding that looked like something from a magazine. The $35,000 for necessary renovations to her condo. The all-expense-paid trip to Bali because she was burned out. The $15,000 for her daughter's private preschool tuition. Each request came with promises. I'll visit more, Mom. I'll call every week. We'll do Sunday dinners like we used to. The promises evaporated as soon as the money cleared. Looking at these folders, what struck me wasn't the dollar amounts. It was the pattern. The expectation that we would always be there, always say yes, always bail them out. As if our life savings were just their inheritance arriving early. I put the folders away, not because I regretted the decision, but because I needed to remember why I'd made it. The phone rang at 8:15 that night. Tyler's name on the screen. Grandma Grace? His voice was tentative. I was wondering if I could stop by tomorrow? I found something of Grandpa Robert's I thought you'd want. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. Of course, sweetheart. Come for lunch. The next day, I made pot roast. Tyler arrived at noon carrying a cardboard box and wearing a flannel shirt that had belonged to Robert. He'd grown into it since Robert gave it to him 2 years ago. We ate in the kitchen, talking about everything and nothing. His classes at community college. His job at the hardware store. His plans to maybe study engineering someday. You know, he said, helping himself to seconds, Grandpa Robert used to say something that stuck with me. He said real wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you don't need to own to be happy. I smiled through sudden tears. That sounds exactly like him. After lunch, Tyler insisted on washing dishes. As he dried the plates, he mentioned he'd been accepted into a transfer program at the University of Washington's engineering school, but he was worried about costs. How much? I asked. He named a figure, $18,000 for the year, including housing. Apply for it, I said simply. But Grandma, it's expensive, and I know. Tyler, I interrupted gently. Do you know why your grandfather and I worked so hard all those years? He shook his head. For moments like this. To help people who actually value the opportunity. When he left, carrying leftover pot roast I'd insisted he take, I stood at the door watching his beat-up Honda pull away. The difference between him and his parents couldn't have been starker. Sienna called the next morning. No greeting, just straight to business. Mom, Tyler mentioned you're paying for his tuition. Good morning to you too, Sienna. Sorry. She didn't sound sorry. I'm just concerned. You just lost Dad. You shouldn't be making major financial decisions right now. I took a slow breath. Actually, I've made several major financial decisions recently. Silence. Then, what kind of decisions? Why don't you come visit? We can talk in person. I'm really swamped at work, Mom. You know how it is. Yes, I said quietly. I know exactly how it is. The same reason you couldn't come to your father's funeral while you were getting a hot stone massage in Arizona. How did you? Instagram, Sienna. You posted photos during your father's burial. A long pause. Then a rushed explanation about emotional processing and self-care and therapy recommendations. Come see me if you want to talk, I said. Otherwise, I'll assume you're too busy. Like always. I hung up before she could respond. Marcus showed up the next day without calling first, as he always did when he wanted something. His Tesla pulled into the driveway with an aggressive whir. "Mom." He hugged me briefly, like checking off a box. "You look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" "I'm fine, Marcus." "What brings you here?" He glanced around the living room like he was appraising it. "Sienna told me about your conversation. We're worried about you." "Are you?" "Of course." He sat on the couch, Robert's spot. "Losing Dad was hard on everyone." "I'm sure it was," I replied. "Though some people seem to have handled it better than others." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Look, about the funeral. That Tokyo deal was critical. I really couldn't." "I know," I said, sitting across from him. "The same deal Dad and I gave you $40,000 to start." "How did that turn out, by the way?" He blinked. "That was years ago. So were the $75,000 for your MBA, and the $62,000 for your house, and the $28,000 to cover your business shortfall." Should I continue? "Why are we talking about this now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Because your father died, Marcus, and I'm taking stock. Not just of assets, but of choices." "What does that mean?" "It means I changed our will. You and Sienna have been removed. Everything goes to Tyler." The shock on his face would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. "Tyler?" "Mom, he's barely out of high school. He's 19, he's in college, and he has more integrity than you've shown in decades." Marcus stood up, his face reddening. "This isn't fair. It's grief talking. You're not thinking clearly." "Actually," I said calmly, "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Your father built everything we have through hard work and principles. Principles you seem to have forgotten." "This is about the funeral, isn't it?" "The funeral was just the final straw, Marcus. This is about years of taking without giving. Years of treating your parents like an ATM instead of people who loved you." Silence. Then, trying a different approach, "Let's talk rationally. Maybe we can reach a compromise. Something fair to everyone." "There's nothing to compromise on. The decision is final." His jaw tightened. "You're going to regret this. Sienna and I can contest the will." "You can try," I said. "But you'd only be proving my point." He grabbed his keys and slammed the door on his way out. Through the window, I watched him immediately pull out his phone, probably calling Sienna. That night, I opened the good scotch again and took it outside. The sunflowers in the garden were past their peak but still standing, their heavy heads bent but not broken. Robert used to say, "Love is like growing flowers, Grace. It needs consistent care. Sometimes you have to cut back what's not healthy so the rest can thrive." Our cutting back season had arrived. 3 days of silence followed. No calls from Marcus or Sienna. Just texts from Tyler asking if I needed help with anything around the house. The storm arrived on Monday in the form of Sienna and her husband Derek showing up unannounced. Sienna walked in without knocking, as always. "Mom, we need to talk." Derek lingered near the door, looking at his phone as usual. "Good morning, Sienna," I said, continuing to water my plants. "Is it true what Marcus told me? That you've disinherited us?" I set down the watering can. "Why don't you sit down?" She sat stiffly on the couch. Derek remained standing. "It's not insane, Sienna. It's consequences." "Consequences for what?" For missing one funeral? The casual dismissal in her voice hit like a slap. You really think it's just the funeral? I kept my voice level. Your father was sick for 3 months, Sienna. You visited once, for 90 minutes, before inventing an emergency at work. You didn't call to check on him. And when he died, you chose a spa retreat over saying goodbye. I was processing my grief. You were posting selfies, I interrupted. And what about Tyler? You're saying he deserves everything and we get nothing? Tyler visited every week. He read to your father when his eyesight started failing. He mowed our lawn. He drove me to appointments. He was there, Sienna. You weren't. This isn't fair, Mom. We're entitled to that inheritance. It's ours by right. Actually, it's mine. And I decide where it goes. Derek finally looked up from his phone. Mrs. Chen, Sienna is just concerned about you. Decisions made during grief can be. Save it, Derek, I said. Neither of you cared about me or Robert except when you needed money. The silence was thick. You're being cruel, Sienna whispered. Dad would never approve. Your father, I replied, spent 3 months hoping his children would visit one more time. He died disappointed. Don't tell me what he would approve of. Sienna grabbed her purse. This isn't over, Mom. Marcus is already talking to lawyers. Let him, I said. After they left, I returned to my plants. The watering can sat where I'd left it. I finished watering Robert's sunflowers and sat in the porch rocker. The phone rang inside. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. On the 4th call, I answered. Grace? It's Margaret from next door. My neighbor sounded worried. I saw Sienna storm out. Is everything all right? Margaret and her husband Tom had been our neighbors for 28 years. They knew us better than our own children did. I'm fine, Margaret. Just setting some boundaries. Good for you, she said firmly. Tom and I were wondering, would you like to come for dinner tonight? Nothing fancy. Just company. The invitation surprised me. I'd been avoiding people since Robert died. But suddenly, sitting with old friends who actually knew Robert sounded perfect. I'd love that. Thank you. That evening, over Margaret's famous chicken and dumplings, I told them everything. The empty funeral. The changed will. The confrontations with my children. Margaret squeezed my hand. You did what needed doing, Grace. Robert would understand. They're my children, I said, feeling the tears I'd held back finally come. How did we get here? Tom, always practical, poured more iced tea. Sometimes people take paths we don't understand. You and Robert gave them every advantage. What they did with those advantages was their choice. Margaret nodded. Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. And Tyler? I asked. Am I doing right by him? That boy's got his head on straight, Tom said. Robert always said so. If only the others were more like Tyler, he'd say. I went home feeling less alone. Not because anything had changed, but because I'd been heard without judgment. A letter arrived the next morning. Marcus's handwriting, formal, careful. I took it to the garden with coffee. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe you're right about some things. I wasn't the son I should have been these past years. Work took over. Life got complicated. I put you and Dad on the back burner without realizing it. About the funeral, there's no excuse. I should have been there. That's a regret I'll carry forever. About the will, I understand your disappointment, even though it hurts. Tyler is a good kid. Maybe we can discuss a distribution that acknowledges your concerns while not completely cutting out your own children. Please think about it. We're still family. Marcus. I read it 3 times. It was conciliatory, almost sincere. Almost. The mention of distribution revealed the real motive, negotiation, not remorse. Still, it was something. I left the letter on the table without responding. Tyler showed up that afternoon with a toolbox. Grandma, your back gate is hanging crooked. Thought I'd fix it. I watched him work, his careful movements so like Robert's. The way he measured twice. The way he stepped back to check his work. Tyler, I said when he finished, there's something I need to tell you. We sat on the back steps. I explained the will, the decision to leave everything to him. He was quiet for a long time. Grandma, I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly why you deserve it, I said. You didn't do these things expecting something in return. You did them because you cared. Mom and Uncle Marcus are going to be furious. They already are. He shook his head. I don't want to cause more family problems. I took his hands in mine. They were calloused, working hands. Tyler, your grandfather built everything we have with honest work. He valued people who did the same. You're the right person to carry that forward. His eyes were wet. I'll try not to let you down. I know you won't. After he left, I sat on the porch until sunset, rocking gently in the chair Robert built 30 years ago. The sky turned orange and purple, then indigo. Am I doing the right thing, Robert? I asked the darkening sky. The evening breeze felt like an answer. The next week, Patricia called. Grace, I wanted to let you know Marcus contacted me. He wanted to know if the will had been officially filed and recorded. And? I confirmed it had been. He asked about the possibility of contesting it. What did you tell him? The truth. That it's your right to distribute your assets as you see fit, and the document is legally sound. Thank you, Patricia. He mentioned wanting to make you a compromise proposal. I'm sure he does. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I had shared breakfast for 37 years. Where the kids did homework. Where we celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a will, but a letter. An explanation for Marcus and Sienna to read after I was gone. My dear children. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to understand my decision wasn't made in anger or spite. I wrote for hours, pouring decades of love and disappointment onto the pages. I told them about the dreams Robert and I had for them. About watching with growing sadness as distance grew between us. About how, in the end, it wasn't about money, it was about presence, time, the small kindnesses that make a family. And I told them that despite everything, I still loved them. A mother's love doesn't disappear, even when it's been wounded over and over. I sealed the letter and wrote on the envelope, to be opened after my passing. The doorbell rang at 9 the next morning. Marcus stood there, not in his usual suit but in jeans and a plain t-shirt. He looked younger. Vulnerable. Mom, he said. Can we talk? I let him in. He looked around like he was seeing the house for the first time in years. You repainted, he observed. 3 years ago. He nodded, embarrassed. Can I sit? I gestured to the couch. He sat like a visitor, not like someone who'd grown up here. I got your letter, I said. Mom, before you say anything, I understand your disappointment. We weren't the children we should have been. No, you weren't. He looked surprised at my bluntness. About the will. I thought maybe we could find a solution. A compromise. 50% to Tyler, 25% each to Sienna and me. I looked at my son. The baby I'd rocked. The toddler I'd taught to read. The man who was now treating this like a business negotiation. Marcus, I said calmly, this isn't a negotiation. It's not a business deal. It's a decision based on who understood what your father and I valued. But we're your children, he said, frustration creeping into his voice. That has to count for something. It does count. That's why we spent decades helping you financially. The MBA, the house, the business bailouts. You already got your share, Marcus. Several times over. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, I saw understanding in his eyes, not of the money he'd lost, but of something far more valuable he'd thrown away. I really messed up, didn't I? He said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stood slowly. I'm going to think about this, Mom. Really think about it. At the door, he paused. I miss him. Dad. I didn't realize how much until it was too late. I miss him too, I said. Every day. After Marcus left, I went to the garden. The sunflowers were showing new growth, small shoots emerging from what looked like dead stalks. Maybe, I thought, something was beginning to grow in Marcus too. Not enough to change my decision, that was final. But maybe enough for him to understand what he'd lost. And perhaps that was a more valuable legacy than any inheritance. Spring came quietly, painting the garden with new colors. The sunflowers bloomed again, tall and bright, stubborn in their beauty like Robert always was. 6 months had passed since I changed the will. 6 months of silence and tentative reconciliations. Marcus called weekly now. Not to discuss money, but to check on me. Brief conversations, sometimes awkward, but real. Sienna was different. After our confrontation, she'd retreated into wounded silence. She sent occasional texts about weather or recipes, but avoided any mention of the will or her father. Tyler had become a constant in my life. He came for Sunday lunch, sometimes bringing small gifts. Not expensive things, but thoughtful ones. A book he thought I'd like. Fresh herbs from the farmer's market. A bird feeder he'd built himself. One Sunday, he arrived with a large folder under his arm. What's that? I asked as we prepared lunch together. He smiled. A project I wanted to show you before I commit to it. After we ate, he spread papers across the table. Blueprints. Budget sheets. Drawings. Remember we talked about doing something meaningful with the properties? He pointed to the plans. I was thinking, what if we turned the lake house into a summer camp? For kids from low-income families. Free programs in nature education, swimming, basic life skills. I studied the detailed plans, seeing the care in every element. And this, he continued, showing more drawings, is for the house. Eventually. Years from now. A community workshop space where people can learn trades, woodworking, basic home repair. The kind of stuff Grandpa Robert taught me. I looked at my grandson, no longer a teenager but a young man with vision and heart. Your grandfather would have loved this, I said, my voice thick. Tyler smiled. Remember how he used to say a good space should teach people to help themselves? I remembered perfectly. It was one of Robert's core beliefs. Tyler, these are beautiful plans. But this will cost significant money. He nodded. I know. I'm saving up, and I have some friends from school who said they'd help with the labor. I figure if I work for a few years. Why wait? I interrupted. Why not start now? Now? But you're still. Tyler, I said gently, I'm 76 years old. I'd rather see this happen while I'm here to enjoy it. His smile was worth everything. The following week, I took Tyler to the bank. We set up a dedicated account and I transferred funds to begin the lake house project. Not everything, I kept enough for my security, but enough to get his dream started. The bank manager, who'd known Robert and me for decades, smiled as we signed papers. Robert would be so proud. Yes, I agreed. He always said money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it. Leaving the bank, Tyler seemed overwhelmed. Grandma Grace, I promise I'll use every dollar wisely. I'll track everything. I squeezed his arm. I know you will, sweetheart. That's why we're doing this. News travels fast in small communities. Marcus and Sienna heard within days. Marcus called that evening. Mom, I heard you and Tyler opened a project account. For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain myself. Yes, we did. A pause. Can I ask what for? To fund Tyler's project. He's converting the lake house into a summer camp for underprivileged kids. Another, longer pause. That's actually a great idea. It was all Tyler's idea. If you need help with permits or legal stuff, I can help with that. No charge. The offer surprised me. Thank you, Marcus. I'll tell Tyler. After hanging up, I stared at the phone for a long time. Not the reaction I'd expected. Sienna appeared the next morning. No Derek, no luxury car, just her, driving a modest sedan I didn't recognize. Mom, she said at the door. Can we talk? I let her in cautiously. She sat in the kitchen where we'd had our most important conversations over the years. I heard about Tyler, she began. The camp at the lake house. I nodded, waiting. I think. She paused. I think it's wonderful. Dad always wanted to do something like that. You remember that? She nodded. He used to talk about creating opportunities for kids who didn't have advantages. I wasn't listening. We sat in silence, the kitchen clock ticking. I'm getting divorced, she said suddenly. What? A sad smile. Ironic, right? After that wedding you and Dad paid for. Derek and I, we built a life based on appearances. Big house, fancy cars, Instagram perfect everything. But nothing real underneath. She met my eyes. Since you changed the will, I've been thinking a lot. About what really matters. About who really matters. Mom, you were right. I became someone Dad would have been disappointed in. A tear slid down her cheek. And I can never tell him I'm sorry. It's not too late to change, Sienna. She smiled sadly. For some things it is. But maybe not for everything. That afternoon, I drove her to the cemetery. We stood before Robert's grave, now with a headstone engraved with a quote he loved. The value of a life is measured not in what we acquire, but in what we give. Sienna knelt, placing her hand on the stone. I stepped away, giving her privacy for her overdue goodbye. From a distance, I watched my daughter, head bowed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Better late than never, perhaps. On the drive back, she asked about Tyler's project. Could I help somehow? I have marketing experience. I could help with outreach, fundraising. I'm sure Tyler would appreciate that, I said. Why don't you ask him? Would he even want my help? After everything? Tyler doesn't hold grudges. In that way, he's just like his grandfather. The following Sunday, something unprecedented happened. I had both my children and my grandson at the same table for the first time in years. The meal started awkwardly. Marcus and Sienna were clearly uncomfortable. Tyler was politely cautious. But as we ate, something shifted. Marcus asked genuine questions about the camp. Sienna offered practical marketing ideas. Tyler listened, responded, even laughed. It wasn't perfect. Decades of hurt don't heal over pot roast. But it was a beginning. Over coffee, Marcus cleared his throat. Tyler, your project with Grandma, it's something Grandpa Robert would have been proud of. Tyler looked surprised. Thanks, Uncle Marcus. If you need help with legal work, permits, any of that bureaucratic stuff, I'm here. No charge. Sienna added, and I can help with the website, social media, community outreach. I've got some contacts who might donate supplies. Tyler glanced at me, confused by this sudden change. I gave him a small smile. That would be amazing, he said finally. I'm hoping to start renovations next month. And so, on a spring Sunday, something small began to grow between my children and grandson. Not forgiveness exactly, not forgetting, but acknowledgement. Possibility. After everyone left, I sat on the porch watching the evening light fade. The sunflowers swayed in the breeze, tall and bright. Would you call this redemption or just convenience? I asked the wind, imagining Robert's response. I could almost hear him chuckle. Maybe both, Grace. Maybe it doesn't matter as long as everyone's growing. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The lake house renovation began on a Monday in early June. Tyler had assembled a team, friends from college, local volunteers, and surprisingly, Marcus and Sienna. Marcus showed up wearing work clothes I didn't know he owned, carrying already approved building permits. Called in a few favors, he explained. Saved us 6 weeks of red tape. Sienna arrived with coffee and breakfast sandwiches for everyone. Her hair in a simple ponytail, no elaborate makeup. I also launched the fundraising campaign, she said, showing her laptop. We've already got pledges for $15,000 in materials. I watched my children work alongside Tyler. Marcus holding ladders. Sienna organizing volunteers. Both following Tyler's directions with a humility I'd never seen before. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, loaded glances when someone mentioned Robert, uncomfortable silences when the past crept in. But there was also something new. Respect, maybe. Understanding. At day's end, we sat on the lake house deck, exhausted but satisfied. Marcus had dirt on his expensive jeans. Sienna had paint in her hair. Tyler was smiling more openly than I'd seen in years. Grandpa would have loved this, Tyler said, looking at the structure where old, small windows had been replaced with large ones that would flood the space with light. Yeah, Marcus agreed quietly. He always talked about creating places where people could learn and grow. I think I'm finally starting to understand what he meant. Sienna nodded, watching the sun set over the lake. I miss him so much. I miss his stories, his terrible jokes, his advice, even the advice I pretended not to hear. In the following weeks, a routine developed. Marcus came most weekends, bringing materials he sourced through business connections. Sienna showed up several times a week, coordinating donations, organizing fundraising events, building community excitement around the project. Tyler was the heart of everything, patient, focused, with a clear vision of what the space could become. I watched with mixed emotions. Joy at seeing the project take shape. Pride in Tyler. And a bittersweet ache watching Marcus and Sienna finally demonstrate the qualities Robert and I had always hoped to see. Too late for him to witness it. One afternoon, I found Sienna alone in what would become the camp's library, organizing donated children's books. Getting there, I commented, observing the shelves starting to fill. She nodded, running her hand over the colorful spines. You know what's strange? I'm enjoying this more than my actual career. That's not strange, I replied. Your father always said helping others brings a satisfaction money can't buy. She smiled sadly. He told me that so many times. I just wasn't listening. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Mom, she said hesitantly, about the will. I understand why you did it. Completely. Tyler deserves it. He was there when we weren't. She carefully shelved a picture book. But I want you to know I'm not doing this to change your mind. I'm not trying to get back in your good graces for the inheritance. That ship has sailed, and it should have. I know, I said softly. And I realized it was true. The money was no longer the point. Maybe it never had been. It was about recognition, presence, shared values. Dad would be happy, she said, looking around the transforming space. All of us working together on something that matters. Marcus had his own moment of reckoning a few weeks later. He arrived early one Saturday with lumber for new bunk beds. I sold the Tesla, he announced casually as we unloaded boards. Why? I asked, though I knew which car he meant. He shrugged. Realized I didn't need it. It was about impressing clients more than anything practical. He paused, focusing on the lumber. I used part of the money to establish a scholarship fund at the community college. In Dad's name. For first-generation students studying business. I looked at my son, the man who'd seemed to lose his way for so long, and saw glimpses of the boy he'd been. The kid who'd given his birthday money to a food bank. The teenager who'd volunteered at the homeless shelter. Your father would be proud, I said simply. I hope so, Marcus replied quietly. Tyler seemed most surprised by his parents' transformation. One evening, as we worked together planting a vegetable garden for the camp, he voiced his confusion. Grandma, I don't get it. 6 months ago, they barely visited. Now they're here constantly, helping, contributing. What changed? I thought carefully before answering, my hands in the soil. Sometimes people lose their way. They get caught up chasing things they think matter, status, wealth, success, and forget what's actually important. Sometimes it takes something drastic to wake them up. Like Grandpa dying and you changing the will. Maybe. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe seeing you, the next generation, living differently showed them another path was possible. He considered this, digging holes for tomato plants. Do you think it's real? That they've actually changed? I looked at my grandson, so young but already wise enough to question motives. Trust but watch, I advised. Time reveals people's true hearts better than words ever can. 2 months into the renovation, the Robert Chen youth camp was nearly complete. The sleeping quarters had bunk beds built from reclaimed wood. The common area had large windows overlooking the lake. The library shelves were filled with books. The kitchen was industrial but warm. The grand opening was set for a Saturday in August. Sienna had organized everything: invitations, local press coverage, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, refreshments for visitors. On opening morning, I arrived early. I wanted a few quiet moments alone before the space filled with people and noise. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting patterns on the polished floor. The bunk beds, built with care, lined the walls of the dormitory. In the common area, a large framed photograph of Robert, laughing in his garden, his hands dirty, his eyes bright. Below it, a plaque, Robert Chen Memorial Youth Camp. Founded on the belief that every child deserves opportunity, nature, and hope. Silent tears streamed down my face. How Robert would have loved this. Every detail. Every choice. He sees it, you know. Tyler's voice startled me. He'd entered quietly, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. Somehow, he's here. I nodded, unable to speak. Tyler stepped closer, putting his arm around me. Grandma, I couldn't have done any of this without you. Without you and Grandpa teaching me what actually matters. And without you being brave enough to make a hard choice. It wasn't me, Tyler. It was you. Your vision. Your heart. He smiled, that smile that always reminded me of Robert. I could only do this because you and Grandpa showed me the way. And because you had the courage to follow through. Marcus and Sienna arrived together, both looking nervous. Marcus carried a box of business books for the camp's small library, not get-rich-quick books, but thoughtful works on ethics, leadership, service. Sienna brought fresh flowers and a leather-bound journal. It's a camp log, she explained. To record the history from day one. Every kid who comes through, every moment that matters. The grand opening exceeded expectations. Dozens of families came. Local teachers volunteered to lead programs. The community rallied around the vision. In the middle of the celebration, I noticed Marcus talking animatedly with a group of teenagers about career mentorship. Sienna was organizing a volunteer schedule with parents. Tyler moved through the space, connecting people, building community. Margaret and Tom, our longtime neighbors, found me by the lake. Robert would be bursting with pride, Margaret said, watching the scene. He would, I agreed. Tom observed quietly, then said, "You know what's remarkable? Your kids look different. More like they used to be, years ago." It was true. There was a lightness about them, an authenticity that had been buried under layers of ambition and materialism for too long. Sometimes we lose sight of what matters, I said. And sometimes, thankfully, we find our way back. At day's end, when most guests had left, I gathered with Marcus, Sienna, and Tyler on the dock overlooking the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and orange. Marcus raised a glass of lemonade he'd stopped drinking months ago, another quiet change. To Robert, who taught us more than we ever acknowledged. To Robert, we echoed. And to Grandma Grace, Tyler added. For having the strength to do what was right, even when it was hard. We sat together as evening fell, not in complete reconciliation, some wounds ran too deep, but in understanding. In renewed respect. Driving home that evening, Marcus, Sienna, Tyler and me, there was a different feeling. Not of total healing, but of possibility. At my house, we sat on the porch like we used to when the kids were small and life seemed simpler. The night was warm, fragrant with roses and jasmine. We talked about small things. The weather. The neighbors. Plans for the camp's first session. Then Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, I need to say something. I've been thinking a lot these past months. About Dad. About our choices. About the will. I tensed. Was he finally circling back after everything? Marcus, I started. He held up his hand. Please, just let me finish. This isn't what you think. He took a breath. I wanted to say you were right. About everything. Sienna and I failed Dad. We failed you. We weren't there when it mattered. And your decision about the will was completely justified. I stared at my son, genuinely surprised. It's true, Sienna added. Tyler deserves everything you decided to give him. He understands the value of what you and Dad built, not just financially, but what it really means. Tyler looked uncomfortable. We don't need to talk about. Yes, we do, Marcus insisted. To clear the air completely. Mom, we want you to know we respect your decision. We won't contest it. Ever. And we're not doing this, the camp, the time we're spending here, because of money or inheritance. Sienna finished, we're doing it because we finally understand what Dad tried to teach us our whole lives. That real value isn't in what you accumulate, but in what you build, the connections you create, the good you do. I looked at my children, these adults who'd felt like strangers for so long, and finally saw echoes of Robert in them. Not perfect. Not complete. But present. Your father would be proud of you right now, I said, my voice thick. And so am I. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, I took out the letter I'd written for my children, the one to be opened after my death. I reread it carefully. The words of disappointment, of painful explanation, of love despite everything, they were true when I wrote them. But now they seemed to belong to a different time. A different version of all of us. I folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. Maybe someday I'd rewrite it. Or maybe it was no longer necessary. Some truths don't need to be written. They live in actions, in choices, in the small daily kindnesses that define us. Robert had always known that. And finally, perhaps, his children were learning it too. Robert's first death anniversary arrived with autumn. The leaves turned gold and crimson, and the air carried that bittersweet quality that October always brings. The camp had been a remarkable success. Kids came every weekend. Families volunteered. Teachers led programs. Tyler spent most of his free time there, mentoring, organizing, transforming the vision into living reality. Marcus and Sienna stayed involved too. Marcus had expanded his mentorship program, using business connections to open doors for underprivileged youth. Sienna organized fundraisers and managed the camp's growing social media presence. On the morning of the anniversary, I woke early, a habit from decades with Robert, who'd loved watching sunrise. I made tea and sat on the porch, watching the sky lighten. One year, Robert, I whispered to the morning. It feels like forever and no time at all. I'd planned to visit the cemetery alone. I hadn't mentioned the date to anyone. But as I was preparing to leave, I heard cars in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Marcus getting out of his modest sedan. Behind him, Sienna and Tyler arrived together. I opened the door before they could knock. We thought you might want company today, Tyler said, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. My children stood there, dressed simply, their faces showing genuine understanding of this day's significance. I would love that, I said. The cemetery was quiet that autumn morning. Leaves skittered across the paths. We walked together to Robert's grave, a simple stone as he would have wanted, with his name and dates and the quote he'd lived by. Tyler placed the sunflowers carefully. Marcus brought a small stone, a custom he'd learned in his recent spiritual explorations. Sienna carried a book of poetry Robert had loved. She opened it and read several verses aloud, her voice soft but steady. I stood slightly apart, watching my children and grandson honor the man who'd meant so much to each of us in different ways. When Sienna finished reading, Marcus approached the headstone. "Dad," he said quietly. "It took me too long to understand what you were trying to teach me. About what really matters. About integrity. About being present." He paused. "I know it's late to tell you this, but I hope wherever you are, you can see that I'm trying. Really trying to be better." Sienna stepped forward. "Daddy." Her voice caught. "I miss you so much. Your stories, your laugh, your advice, even the advice I pretended not to hear." She smiled through tears. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I seemed to give up on everything you valued." Tyler knelt silently, his hand on the stone, as if connecting physically with his grandfather. When he stood, I noticed he'd left something, a small carved wooden bird, something he'd made himself. Finally, I approached. My children stepped back, giving me space. "Robert," I murmured, kneeling stiffly. "Look at what happened. It's not what we expected, is it? But maybe it's better." I touched the cold stone. Maybe we needed this shake-up to find our way back. "I love you. I'll always love you." When we regrouped to walk back, Marcus hesitated. "Mom, we'd like to do something today. A celebration of Dad's life. Not sad, but a recognition of what he meant to all of us." "What do you have in mind?" I asked. "A family dinner," Sienna said. "At your house. Together. We'd like to cook for you, Dad's favorite meal." The idea of my children, who could barely boil water, preparing Robert's favorite dishes moved me deeply. "He would love that," I said. That afternoon, my kitchen became chaos as good chaos. My children working together, clumsy but determined, making Robert's favorite foods. Marcus attempted the special dry rub Robert used for ribs. Sienna wrestled with instructions for his beloved apple pie. Tyler coordinated everything, keeping the operation from complete disaster. I sat at the kitchen table, watching and smiling. Robert would have loved this. The mess, the laughter when something went wrong, the small triumphs when something went right. "Dad always said food didn't have to be perfect," Sienna commented, eyeing her lopsided pie crust. "Just made with love and shared with people who matter," Marcus finished. We sat down to dinner at the table set with our wedding china, the dishes Robert and I received 40 years ago and rarely used. Marcus poured water for everyone and raised his glass. "To Robert Chen. Father, grandfather, husband, teacher. The man who taught us what integrity means, even when we weren't listening." "To Robert," we echoed. The food wasn't perfect. The ribs were slightly dry, the pie a bit burned around the edges. But I savored every bite. Stories about Robert emerged naturally. Marcus remembering how Robert taught him to change a tire. Sienna recounting when Robert helped her build a science fair project. Tyler sharing memories of fishing trips. "Remember when Dad decided we all needed to learn basic plumbing?" Sienna asked, laughing. "He turned off the water and made us fix the leaky sink while he supervised." Marcus grinned. I was terrible. Took me 3 hours and Dad just stood there, patient as anything, only helping when we really needed it. He said practical skills were as important as any degree, Sienna added softly. I realized we were truly laughing. Not forced politeness, but genuine joy, sharing happy memories instead of dwelling on loss. After dessert, Tyler nervously cleared his throat. I have something to show everyone. A project I've been working on for today. He disappeared briefly, returning with a wrapped package. It's something I made for all of us, he said, handing it to me. I unwrapped it carefully. A leather-bound book. On the cover in gold lettering, Robert Chen, A Life Well Lived. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a beautifully compiled memory book, old photographs, letters, newspaper clippings about Robert's volunteer work, testimonies from friends and neighbors. How did you gather all this? I whispered. Uncle Marcus helped contact Grandpa's old colleagues. Aunt Sienna interviewed neighbors and friends. I just organized it all. I turned pages slowly, absorbing a life in images. Young Robert with his first car. Robert with baby Marcus on his shoulders. Robert teaching Sienna to ride a bike. Robert and me on our anniversary. Then, in the final pages, something unexpected, recent photos. The camp at various construction stages. Marcus mentoring youth. Sienna organizing book donations. Tyler with kids at a camp session. The last page held a single photograph, the 4 of us in front of the camp on opening day, all smiling beneath the sign with Robert's name. Below it, the legacy continues. I closed the book, unable to hold back tears. Not sad tears, but grateful ones. Marcus and Sienna moved closer, each taking one of my hands. Mom, Marcus said softly, we know we can't make up for not being there when Dad died. Or for all the years we were physically present but emotionally absent. But we want you to know we finally understand what you both tried to teach us. What truly matters. And we're grateful, Sienna added, that you loved us enough to give us a wake-up call. Even though it hurt. I looked at my children, these adults who'd felt like strangers, and saw them clearly now. Not perfect. Still flawed. But trying. Growing. Present. Your father would be so proud of who you're becoming, I said. And so am I. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the bedroom Robert and I had shared for so many years. I took out the letter I'd written for my children and read it one final time. Then I did something I'd been considering for weeks. I tore it up. Not because the pain it described wasn't real. Not because the disappointment hadn't been valid. But because it no longer told the complete story. Instead, I pulled out fresh paper and began writing a new letter. My dear children. If you're reading this, I've gone to join your father. I want you to know that while our journey wasn't always smooth, I'm grateful for where we ended up. You both lost your way for a while. That caused your father and me tremendous pain. But in the end, you found yourselves again. You remembered the values we tried to instill. And you demonstrated something equally important, the capacity to change, to grow, to become better. Tyler will inherit most of our material wealth. This decision stands because he earned it through presence, through character, through being there when it mattered most. But don't mistake this for a final judgment on your worth. You've already received your inheritance, the second chance to become the people your father and I always believed you could be. The camp stands as a testament not just to your father's values, but to your capacity for transformation. That legacy is worth more than any bank account. I love you both. I always have. I always will. Your love, Mom. I sealed this new letter and placed it in the drawer where the old one had been. Outside my window, the garden was settling into autumn sleep. But come spring, Robert's sunflowers would bloom again. Stubborn. Beautiful. Enduring. Just like love. Just like family. Just like second chances. And perhaps, I thought, that was the real lesson Robert had been trying to teach us all along. Not about money or inheritance or who deserves what. But about resilience. About growth. About the possibility of redemption, even when it seems too late. I turned off the light and lay down in our bed, my bed now. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. We did okay in the end, didn't we, Robert? I whispered to the darkness. In my heart, I felt his answer. Not words, but a feeling. A warmth. An approval. Yes, Grace. We did just fine. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. What did you think of Grace's story? Where are you watching from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, consider supporting the channel so I can bring you more meaningful stories like this. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who matter most.